G'day, Ancient Heart here. To talk about the predator female, borderline personality disorder, and the predator female. They exist. It's not all women with BPD. Because, as I'm always saying, because it's factual and true, not all women with BPD are the same. But there is this 10% or so, roughly speaking, what much more severely impacted with BPD that I believe the American pseudoscience of psychiatry with the hegemony of big pharma needs to stop running everything through BPD and looking at trying to, because they're adding like subtype this, subtype that, subtype the other thing, which totally undoes all the work that was really pioneered in the definition of the category for it to be a standalone diagnosis like borderline personality really is still. So, but do women, some women, a percentage, a lower percentage of women than all with BPD, are they predators? Well, yeah. And what does that really mean? Well, that's what's so up for grabs across the internet and with the pseudoscience of the APA, with the hegemony of big pharma, because I really would assert at this juncture in time, with information just rampantly out of control, it's misinformation in so many places. And I see a young millennial men just joining a woman's channel, and the information is highly inaccurate. The what this person says in a couple recent videos doesn't even hold together, but people think it's fabulous. So anyway, you can think whatever you want. You can enjoy whosever videos you want. I just think it's really important to keep it realistic, and for men who've been traumatized, shattered, abused by a female with BPD, which is it or isn't it? Because really, I think these particular women in this category of predation are likely psychopathic and need that diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder. They don't need a BPD diagnosis because there are vast differences between this maybe 10%, which is a lot of women with BPD. And I think the same would be true for men to a degree, but I'll just talk about women here. There is definitely this percentage wherein they should, in the way I see it, the way that it makes sense, is they should be diagnosed as psychopathic. Men should be able to know what they're dealing with. So if you're dealing with a borderline woman, that's pretty significantly traumatizing to shattering to you're going to lose yourself to you're going to find out you likely have codependency and some other things going on, and it's really, these are horrific, tragic experiences. And then the backdrop of culture for men when there's children involved, with these predatory females, that I really believe the diagnosis of BPD isn't the correct diagnosis. But are there some that fit that criteria and then there's something else going on? Well, yeah, maybe, but I don't think it's explained yet. I don't think we have the facts of understanding that. So people are saying people with BPD or women with BPD just flip into narcissistic personality, flip into psychopathic personality. Well, no, that's not how it works. But the thing is, there's no denying, nor have I ever tried to deny or obfuscate or in any way not just say what I'm clearly saying now, like a little bit more clearly, that there are some women in this category of BPD who maybe shouldn't be there, but regardless, who do untold damage to men within the framework of what is basically a lie of feminism that a lot of women need to wake up to, I would assert, because it's kept women as victims more than it's really set women free, or whatever women were after, or I don't know what today's feminists are doing at all. But men definitely need this recognized, that there is a certain percentage. I don't care how people put it now. I still think it's not correct to say it's secondary psychopathy, because to me it just looks like straight up psychopathic behavior. So every time a female with BPD is triggered into emotional dysregulation at different mood states, okay, it doesn't mean she's acting like a narcissist or she's acting out of secondary psychopathy or she's acting like a psychopath. Because there's a whole lot of women with BPD and a whole lot of men that presentation, there is narcissism within BPD. And the essential core defense mechanism used for people with BPD, among others, is splitting. And it's not that different for narcissists. But again, the infantile narcissistic defenses of borderline personality, yes, they exist there. But they are not as formidable. They're formidable, but they're not as formidable as the narcissistic infantile defenses of the narcissist. And people with BPD are not all the same. Women with BPD are not all the same. But there is this 10%, which amounts to a lot of women, that are predatory. And that's why I think they're misdiagnosed and why I think they should be diagnosed as psychopathic women, because that's what they are. And there's no mixing the BPD with that. I don't think. It doesn't make sense. But, and it's hard to know what behavior that they show or feelings that they show, what's really real in this lower percentage of women with BPD, but who do all this predating and predatory behavior and really abuse men in unbelievable, I don't even know the adjective to use, ways, like horrific ways. So women, and there are some women with BPD, like not in this severely impacted category, that's close, somewhere in the middle, that will definitely use their gender against men. And at the cost of not only men, but their children, So does society still support, just plain out, straight up, stupidly, uh, women with BPD and or if they should be diagnosed with ASPD, the predatory woman of any cluster B personality disorder diagnoses, because I think that a lot of the diagnosis isn't accurate where these women are being placed, and men have no idea, and you probably had no idea what you were going to be dealing with in the relationship with a woman with BPD, whether it is a severe presentation or not. So I want to talk a bit more about that. But what I want to say also is there's not a counterbalance, but we need to take a balanced approach to this. Why? Because there's a certain percentage of women who are these predatory women, but this is not all women or men with BPD, because there are gradations of this within BPD. So they're not just flipping into narcissism, and they're not just flipping into psychopathy because they're triggered or because they do thing A, B, or C. But there are women out there, and I've had so many clients who've been through this, so I have always believed people's experience on this, men's experience on this, that these women will, lie and falsely accuse men. And I've had clients that have been arrested, and it's taken a long time and an exorbitant amount of money to clear their names, and nobody should go through that at all. There's just it's just horrendous and beyond. And it happens because of what these severely impacted women, if they have BPD or if they're more to the point, probably straight up psychopathic, they're predators. And that's why I don't think they belong in the BPD diagnosis, but they are predators. And not all women with BPD are predators. They can still hurt people, they can still abuse people, but they're not the same as this subset of women supposedly in BPD with this quote variant of ASPD, which again, the seminal study they point to is silly and ridiculous, and it's not science. But anyway, skipping over that, are there many men out there who are beyond the trauma and the abuse and the impossibility of these relationships with BPD, women with BPD? Are there many men out there that are in a circumstance and situation with somebody more severely impacted with BPD, or who in fact a woman that should be diagnosed as a psychopath? Yeah, absolutely. And what's happening there? It's atrocities for men. And it can't be justified by anything. And I can't tell you how much I care about this and I'm aware of this. because I work with so many male clients, and in that work for 30 plus years, and I'm still working with clients. I don't know how many people I've worked with, thousands or more, and men definitely thousands. And I would say of those numbers, it sort of stays at about a 10 to 15% range of those clients that I've worked with or I'm working with now that really are going through dealing with and being abused and traumatized by a predatory, um, let's just say cluster B, because not so sure they're borderlines. But whatever. The more important point is that men know that not all people with BP are the same, but that what your experience is, the woman that you've been with or might still be with, or the woman that's done all of this to you, it happens and it's horrible. And then men have nowhere to go. And men have to seek legal remedy, but like the system isn't working for men more often than not. And this really, sorry about that, this really matters. And it's really worth talking about much more. And it's why I've set up a support group as well. And I'm going to probably set up one just for men, and maybe even more geared to men who've had this experience of the predatory. Let's just say the predatory borderline, probably likely who should be diagnosed as a psychopath. But does that really matter as compared to what these women are actually doing and the fact that culture supports that? That, the justice system, there's nowhere for men to go. And men are not socialized as young boys, even today, to be in touch with their feelings, or many men feel their feelings. Many men are beyond devastated, traumatized, and gutted, shattered by these women. And and there's that is really important. And then there's when you have a child with or children with these kind of women in BPD or whatever they are, they're predatory. And I don't make any bones about that. I'm just straight up saying it like it is. But it's not all women with BPD is important for people to remember. But if you're with somebody with BPD, if you get into one of these relationships, could this happen to you as a man? I think it could happen to the odd female too, or the BPD male. But can it happen to you if you're a man and does it happen? Yes, it does. And so it's not all women with BPD, but that doesn't matter when you are a man that's been with one of these predating predator women, whether they're correctly diagnosed with BPD, whether it's secondary psychopathy, which I don't think that really makes sense. I think they're straight up psychopaths. So then we look at culture and society, which is not supporting men at all. And so I think, and I'll have much more coming on the lie of feminism. And there's a book by that title that I'm reading right now. But there's much more to learn about gynocentrism and what's been happening, and more to the point, what's happening in the world now for men in general, and especially with this 10 to 15% of those diagnosed with BPD women, whether they should be or not, versus ASPD. But they're predatory. And that's not all women with BPD. I want to say that one more time. But the thing is, they will stop at nothing. Absolutely nothing. And some of them have even taken men's lives. And many other men have gone on to commit suicide. And I really believe, in what Jordan Peterson has forwarded about hierarchical structures, and I'm not saying this in male versus female at all. Hierarchical structures I'm not going to mention. I'm not talking about, quote, patriarchy. I'm not talking about that at all. That this idea that there should be an equality of outcome guaranteed to women is absurd, because there is relatively, I think more people would say things are stacked more against men than there's equality of opportunity. And the lie of feminism, it really was never about equality. So I just want you guys out there to know that I understand and I get it and I care. So whenever I'm explaining BPD, and whenever I'm still reticent to not really go into, they're flipping into narcissism, they're flipping into psychopathy, and this idea of secondary psychopathy, which I still don't think really encapsulates what it is. But that stuff doesn't matter, what the definitions are, or what we can't get right, what psychiatry can't get right, or what isn't really helping from the DSM. But with this group, with this percentage of women that are predators, whatever you want to call them, and I think they should be diagnosed as psychopaths. I think, like in the Red Pill documentary, they said there was one shelter in America that men could go to. And then I think there's one resource center in Canada. And I think it's out west, I can't remember now, but I saw something online the other day. But what I'm here to say is I have clients who've been through this. I know, I understand. So I have never questioned that. And I believe what men are saying about this. And I'm here for men. And the really horrific part of this is that the culture isn't here for men. And culture and the systems and the institutions in our societies are not here for men. And then they're not here for kids either. Because here's something, but if you already have a child with one of these type of quote borderline or psychopathic women that are in this 10 to 15% severely impacted, or however we're going to define this, that beats me right now. But that's not the most important part. Um, if you can help it, don't have a child with one of these women. But if that's already happened, I mean, this is another thing, the heartbreak for men. Somehow, where did it come from? This idea, yeah, mothers are really important to children because they bear the children and they birth the children. And then we hope that they're going to take care of the children. But with a predator female, no matter what that diagnosis is or isn't, or what's clear as mud about that right now, they should not be anywhere near these kids. They definitely ruin children's lives. They set up the next generation of borderlines or narcissists or psychopaths, and more often than not. And what are men supposed to do when they've been falsely accused, lost reputation, lost jobs, smeared beyond belief, and now they're being alienated, parentally alienated by the predatory female with BPD, or who's really probably a psychopath. And society just stands by, and all the institutions work in the favor of the woman. Well, it's just abjectly, horrifically nonsensical. And I can't say that strongly enough. And, I worked with a client a few years back who took on the province of Ontario, took on social workers, took on all kinds of people at different levels and lawyers. And in a really important case, and he eventually won it in totality, but this was after he'd been parentally alienated from his two children, to the point where when all this takes place after years and years of his efforts in a world where none of these systems understand or get it yet still. And why would that be? Well, yeah, it has something to do with the lie of feminism for sure. So there is something happening, and it's been, from university campuses. There's, I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but this women's studies, like I took a course or two in that many years ago, but like it's morphed since. But like I really couldn't understand it even then, because what women's studies is doing is just propagating and making worse and worse by the day. Whether some of these women are cluster B or they're all cluster B or not, I don't know. But these rabid fifth wave feminists, or even the fourth wave or the third wave, maybe somebody would say all of it, but or many people would say all of it. But the reality now today is men need many, many more rights, and chief among them is to be able to redress what these women actually do in being predators against men, and all that involves. And it involves a lot more than parental alienation and how the courts side with these women all the time, or most of the time. It's horrific. So, if you're a man out there and you're going through this, just know I really do hear men on this. And of course, my clients. I just wish there were answers. I just wish there was a solution. And I know that there are men's conferences and men's movements that are, trying to address this. But as a woman, and an older woman now, obviously, but like, it's taken me a lot of years. It's not new to me. I've known for probably like 10 years or more. I've understood this, but it's taken years to get through the lies of feminism. And I wasn't even really that feminist, I was somewhat feminist, or like in that vein of what we all thought it was, back from its first iterations, and sort of the women's liberation movement. But there is an inherent lie in feminism, and whatever these young women are screaming about today, I don't understand it at all. And so I believe the essential lie of feminism, which is that it was never about equality, is true. And now, men of all ages, but especially millennial men and the next generation coming up, it's just horrific now. And everything about not only cluster B, but other things, but borderline personality, narcissistic personality, antisocial personality, and still histrionic personality, even though they don't want to have that in the DSM-5 anymore, it's exponentially getting worse. So I want men to know that I get it, and I hear men's experiences on the fact that there are predatory cluster B women. And what category do they belong in? I think more they belong in ASPD. But the point is, if they're coming through the lens and they're being misdiagnosed, is what I believe, with BPD, then you think you're dealing with a borderline, but you're not. But most other women with BPD are not going to be this presentation of the 10 to 15%, which is a horribly huge number. So I think red pill men and MGTOW men and other philosophies that men are ascribing to is really understandable. And I have so many male clients working with now, and I've worked with in the past over the years, that they really are so devastated, traumatized. Some of them barely hang on to their lives. Some don't, right? And they just don't see that they could ever have another relationship. So, there's that. And then there's men who are going around and the exes reverse hoovering and getting hoovered. And these are with women who are not in this percentage of women with BPD who should really probably be diagnosed as psychopaths. But the predatory cluster B woman, because where does she really fit? I think antisocial personality disorder, they, not just she, but they fit. It's happening. And there still is nothing being done. I mean, men are working hard, and I want to be a voice for men as well, as there are some other women out there, and well, some really famous ones. But I'm just saying, nothing is changing. Like or not enough is changing by a long shot yet. And there's nothing reasonable or okay about this predatory female in cluster B, wherever they actually belong. That, first of all, it's not all women with BPD, but society and culture is definitely, I think there's toxic femininity, and definitely there's the lie of feminism, and there is rampant misandry, which is the hatred of men, and the story of history since the 60s anyways, is yeah, women have had things to overcome, but society is so designed to protect women to the point where they end up protecting predatory women. They're not dealt with properly in the law a lot of the times. And even if they are at some point or other, they've shattered men's lives. And that matters so much. And then on top of that, courts and other institutions in our societies do not work for men. They work for women first, but they're not working. So I know it, I get it, And what I try to parse here to keep it accurate is that this is 10 to 15% of those diagnosed with BPD who largely are more severely impacted by that and or really would fit the diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder. And this is a failure, another failure, on top of a slew of failures of the pseudoscience of American psychiatry with hegemony of big pharma. They're running it all through BPD because it's about psych meds. And it's not about getting it right. And it's not about people actually knowing the proper signs of these type of predatory women in cluster B. But just so you know, the rest of the women who aren't in that percentage of women, still doing damage, still abusing people, still ruining men's lives, still shattering their lives, breaking their hearts, and maybe on that level, parental alienation without all those false accusations that really, really lead men into, I don't know how else to put it, but like beyond hell. And I feel for men and I care. And I'm going to have a lot more coming on this channel on my website at ajmahari.co. And if men are interested, I have a lot of male clients. If they're interested in a support group, if you're interested in a support group just for men, then I would like to provide that as well. Because right now, the one that's coming up soon is just a general support group for those who've been with somebody with BPD. But I would like to start a support group for men who experience the predation, which isn't all of women with BPD. But men who've been in this percentage, whatever it is, 10 to 15%, with likely the psychopathic woman, that really isn't talked about. I don't even know how many diagnoses of a psychopathic woman there have ever been in throughout all time, or what the studies. I don't even know that they're studying that. And what does that even point to? Because there needs to be a lot more inquiry about what is happening with the predatory cluster B female and where do they really deserve to be categorized and how do we really understand this, because it's really real. And along with the lie of feminism and cultural Marxism, men are getting creamed. And I know that, and I hear that, and I care about that. So I'll have more coming on this. And I wish that there were more answers. But the only slightly good news part in this is that men can heal from this. But when they're alienated from their children too, I mean, it's just sort of like the wounding never stops. And I just wanted to acknowledge that fully today. That I am struggling in the clinical aspect side of things with definitions and parsing diagnoses that matters still, I believe. But I believe it's also gone awry, and that it is to the disservice and obliteration of men. So I hope this is validating for a lot of you out there. Whatever degree that you've experienced the borderline woman, there is a predatory cluster B woman. And what category does she belong in? You know, I think ASPD. But the point is, it doesn't matter. Because when you're going through this or you've been through this, a lot of men are just lucky to escape with their lives, and a lot of men don't. And that matters. And we need to talk about it more. And I'm definitely here to do that. And I would welcome any and all men's comments on this, what you've been through, what you'd care to share. If you'd like to be interviewed by me, if you'd like to get your story out there, if you know of other resources, anything you could add, or if you just like to talk about your own personal experience, I would love to interview you and put it on this channel and have more men's voices sharing this experience that I'm relaying and saying I'm well aware of. And I'm not going to take any much effort in this video at all to parse this, that, and the other thing. The predatory cluster B woman, however she's defined, where these women are defined, wherever they come from, whatever they should really be diagnosed with, that's what needs to be straightened out in one way. But is mental health prevailingly failing men in this area? Absolutely, without a doubt. And that breaks my heart, and that matters to me. So I hope that you can see where I'm really coming from, if in fact it was in doubt for anyone. Because men's mental health is not being attended to even a modicum of enough, especially when a man and many men have run into the predatory Cluster B woman. And I think I'm going to say it that way because it might span all 3 or 4 diagnoses within Cluster B, but to what degree, and it's clear as mud, but the point is it's happening. And that's what we have to deal with. And I'm out here to deal with you. Sorry, I'm out here to help you if this has been your experience. And I mean, I feel for men, I really do. I feel for women who've been hurt by borderline men as well, or any Cluster B man, but I really feel for men because there is a lie of feminism. There is the reality of misandry and the predatory Cluster B woman. So let's not quibble about what diagnosis is and where they belong. That should be sorted out because this is another area in which men are being totally failed by mental health systems. And so many clinicians out there don't understand borderline personality, narcissistic personality, or antisocial personality, or codependency, or any of this mix, let alone this horrific experience of men at the hands and the just endless damage and atrocity that these predatory females slay men with, really. So it's totally abhorrent. It's totally unacceptable, and I want to give it much more airtime on this channel. It's growing, it's still small, but I think it's really important. And so if you're a man who's had this experience, just know I understand. Sometimes I get a little weighed down into the trying to be as accurate as I can with the information, with these lousy diagnoses and the way that things are, they're parsed or not parsed, and a lot of misinformation about out there because it's not all women with BPD is all I would say. But what's more important than talking about that right now is to just say the predatory Cluster B woman, they exist and they are out there, and they are alienating men from their children. They are unjustifiably, abhorrently lying and manipulating justice systems and having men falsely arrested, and they falsely accuse men of all kinds of things. And where are the resources for men? Where are the mental health resources for men in this area? More to the point, to begin with, where because there is this, I don't know that it's misandry in the mental health profession. Among some women it could be, but it's definitely this gynocentrism that is still prevailing in too many areas of mental health today. And it's so much there for women. It's failing children all over the place because fathers, alienated by these predatory Cluster B women, children are left with them by courts. It's like, it's crazy. So I hear the experience, I understand. If you're interested in a group for men who've been through this with the predatory Cluster B, whatever the diagnosis is supposed to be, whatever, I don't care about that anymore. I mean, I care about it, but I don't care about it in terms of the fact that what's happening to men has to be seen and talked about much more, regardless of whether the diagnoses are correct or incorrect, or how they're kind of being all, a lot of misinformation out there about the diagnoses and who are these predatory Cluster B women. But they exist and they're out there. So does it matter which label they've been given by the pseudoscience of American psychiatry or anywhere in the world where they can't seem to correctly diagnose what they should really be diagnosing? So men, any man that's gone through this, I feel for you. And I'd be really interested in men's comments here. I'm here for you. And like I said, if you want to be interviewed, if you'd like to put your voice and share your voice on this channel, if you would like a group just for men, just who've experienced the predatory Cluster B woman, I'm going to coin that phrase right now today, the predatory Cluster B woman. Let's not try to parse what their diagnosis is, or is it right or wrong. Let's just look at the reality of the challenge for men in too many areas of mental health and getting services there and getting heard there. And then culturally speaking, what's happening to men. And then we go to the lie of feminism and the gynocentrism involved, And then the next thing is the law and the courts don't get it. And men are being terrorized. And I care. Take care.